Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for August 4th through 10th. This week I read 5 books, I watched 2 shows, and I listened to 1 book. I'm in a different location because I am pet sitting for my best friend. There's a dog, there's a cat, there's a lizard, there's a frog, and they've all been kept away from here so they don't knock over my tripod. First I finished Kings, Queens, and Inbetweens. This is about Nima, who has a lot going on in her personal life. About a year and a half ago, her mom just split and left her and her dad. She's also had a crush on one of her friends for 3 years and is just about to tell her about it. And she has to play wing woman for her other best friend, and that isn't always good. There's a carnival that comes to town once a year, and she ends up wandering into this tent that has something that intrigues her, and it all goes from there. And by all goes from there, I mean this gets into some drag culture. Not only does she basically immediately befriend this drag queen, who I would also want to befriend by the way, she also falls for a drag king. She's trying to keep this new part of her life under wraps, but this bully keeps popping up at inopportune moments and keeps scaring the crap out of her, quite honestly. They were sort of friends when they were kids, and she would love it if he would just stop being kind of a douche. I had fun with this one, although it was set in the States and this character was 17 or 18 years old and didn't have a problem getting into bars, which was a little bit weird. I don't think this would have lost anything if this character were aged up to legal drinking age besides being able to be called a YA book. There was a delightful spectrum of characters along the way, and I enjoyed it for that. Next I finished Stillhouse Lake. This is about a woman who found out that her husband was a serial killer, and she was actually tried as an accessory even though she had no idea he'd been doing this for the entirety of their marriage. She was acquitted, and even though her and her children should be considered victims, there is no witness protection for that type of thing, so they've been on the run ever since. This means they burn through different identities, and every time they're settled in a place and something seems slightly off, they run again. They're finally settled down somewhere that seems quite safe until a body turns up in the lake that has been tortured the way her husband used to do it. The biggest problem with this is there is a large amount of online trolls that think that she still had something to do with all of those murders. Therefore, there are people constantly trying to find her location and dox her and to get people to kill her and her children even though they had nothing to do with it because they believe that she did. Understandably, this means she is quite paranoid. She actually checks the internet every single day and keeps meticulous notes about all of this. And she's just afraid that sooner or later her previous life is going to be exposed to the people of this small town, and she is ready to run if that comes to terms. What I really enjoyed about this read is you, as a reader, also became kind of paranoid of all of the characters that you were introduced to. You had to figure out if they were going to be a threat or if they were going to turn on her if something went sideways, and that was interesting. It also just made me super mad about how people treat women who are in the lives of serial killers. Many of these online harassers praise Mel for killing all of these women, but want to kill his wife for some reason because she helped him, but she didn't, but they think that she did. A lot of that online mentality is steeped in misogyny and bullshit, and was hard to read because I know it is super real. The way this ended off, it felt like it's probably the first in a series, so I might consider reading more of them along the way, assuming my library has them. Next I finished Feast of Sparks. This is the second in the Thornchapel Quartet. You might remember that last week I read A Lesson in Thorns, which is the first in this series, and then we rolled directly into buddy reading this one. All I knew going into this is somebody I trust gave it a 1 star, so I knew that there was going to be something that was going to make me angry, and Jean and I guessed about halfway through the book what that was going to be. We also had some other guesses that were tangentially correct. This series follows 6 people who were friends when they were children and have come back when they're adults and are basically all sex buddies at this manor. There's a brewing triad relationship between 3 of them, and then the other 3, 2 of them are kind of together, although this one didn't have any of their sex on the page, which we felt was weird. This is a very smutty series, so there was a lot of sex in it, but we found it interesting that all of the sex that we saw included at least 1 person who had a penis, but if there were 2 people that didn't have penises and they were having sex, that sex was off the page for some reason. There was also some questionable bastardization of pagan traditions, although I am by no means an expert on that. I just know a little bit about Beltane, which was the holiday that they were celebrating in this book, and it was very different from what I know of celebrating Beltane when I lived in Scotland. But that doesn't mean that different sections of the UK didn't celebrate it in different ways throughout the ages. There are also a lot of very questionable sexual choices made in this book, and then obviously the ending, which I will not ruin here because all you need to do is go on Goodreads and there are many people that will tell you exactly how this ended. Jean and I saw that coming, but I didn't realize that one of them was going to know about it ahead of time. and that just made it all sorts of wrong. So yeah, at this point I really don't know if I would continue this series. I would continue it out of curiosity more than really enjoying it. There's certain things that I would really like to see corrected in the future, but also there's nothing that I can say here without wrecking anything about this book. Next I read Technically You Started This, and this only took me a few hours because this book is entirely written in text messages. Due to a sibling rivalry, there are two cousins that have the exact same name, down to the fact that they are the second of that name. And they were only born a few days apart, so both of them are in the same grade at school. One day Haley gets a text message from one of them and she assumes it's the other of that name. They strike up a friendship only over text, and he comes to realize that she thinks that he is his cousin and that she actually really doesn't like him. He tries to change that because he actually is starting to really like her. The reason I picked this book up is I heard that it had demisexual rep, and I am demisexual, so I was interested in seeing that on the page, and Haley is in fact demisexual. And that simply means that she really needs to get to know somebody on an emotional level before she can have some form of physical attraction to them. While reading this book, I felt that so hard because I would really love to have a text-based relationship with somebody, like a friendship that moves on from there. That is something that I would very much enjoy. What I really enjoyed about this is it is just text messages between her phone and his phone, and that makes it seem like you would never be able to get any other characters in there, but occasionally her parents will have her phone because she's done something wrong, or his friends will have his phone because he left it unlocked and they're just messing with him. And seeing this story unfold in that format made it very interesting, even though you could guess certain things ahead of time. This week I also sped through If It Makes You Happy by Kann. I absolutely loved Let's Talk About Love, so I knew I was probably going to love this as well. I knew nothing about the plot going into this one because I just knew that I like this author and I was going to read it, and I was very, very happy to find out that it features people in a queer platonic relationship. Although in the same line that I found out that they were in a queer platonic relationship, I also found out that they don't like the term zucchini, which is the partners in a queer platonic relationship, which made me a little bit sad because my zucchini and I think that that term is adorable. Every summer, Winnie, her brother, and her cousin go to visit her grandmother and work in her diner. This diner is in a very small town. In fact, it's right next to another very small town, and I think the inhabitants of both towns are less than 1,000 people. Think quaint Stars Hollow vibes, but slightly less white. This is also where Winnie's partner Kara lives, and where her crush lives. Here's the thing about being in a queer platonic relationship. It's hard to explain to people. To try to explain a little bit, it's like there's this step between general friendship and romantic relationship. And what that step in between is different for different sets of partners. To put it in the plainest terms, it means that that person is very, very important to you, just like a romantic partnership would be. And that means that if one of the partners wants to date outside of this partnership, the person that they're dating has to know about this person and accept them. This book talks a lot about that relationship dynamic, and I really enjoyed it for that. It also talks a lot about how Winnie is black, fat, and people see her as being explosive when she gets angry. The thing is, she quite often gets angry because nobody is listening to her because they see her as fat and black and a woman. And if I'm getting angry just thinking about someone having that experience, imagine somebody actually in those shoes. In addition, this book also talks a lot about fat phobia and toxic relationships, and there's a romance, and I very much enjoyed it. On to the shows I watched this week. Firstly, I watched one episode of Good Omens. It was episode 3, which is the one with the weird pacing, which if you want to know my full thoughts on that, I did a whole vlog about it, so I will point you in that direction. I'm rewatching it with a friend who I recently made read the book. I also watched the entire 4th season of Veronica Mars. I watched the first 3 seasons when I was a teenager, and I didn't do any form of recap for myself going into this, so I'm sure there were little things that I probably missed along the way, but I did recognize a lot of the characters that popped up. Now, if you were to look up articles about this season, you would be immediately spoiled for the thing that happens in the last episode, because it's literally in every article online. Which means if you haven't watched the season, don't look it up. I was fortunate that I didn't look anything up ahead of time because I like to go into things not knowing. But yeah, something had happened at the end of this season that Rob Thomas said he put there because he wants to do another season and couldn't see another season happening if he hadn't done this thing. Which I think is wrong, but I'm not a showrunner, so. The cast member I enjoyed the most who wasn't part of the original series was Patton Oswalt. He played this character that was part of a group called Murderheads, and they are the people that try to solve cold cases, and that was immediately interesting to me because his late wife was Michelle McNamara, who was somebody who was trying to solve a cold case. She unfortunately died quite suddenly while she was writing a book about these murders that were unsolved that she had been researching for years, so I found it touching and interesting that he decided to take on this role. And besides saying it was very fun to see these characters 15 years later, there's not much else I can say about this series because it is an 8-episode mystery that you should just go consume. The book I listened to this week was The Diviners by Libba Bray. This was for the Diviners read-along, which I very much enjoyed. Firstly, let me tell you that the audiobook was a great choice because the narrator does a fantastic job. She does all of these great accents for these different characters. It was amazing. To the point where I'm just very mad that my library doesn't have an e-audiobook of the next book in the series because I would really like to listen to it. Not to mention these books are like 600 pages and I like to listen to my longer books so I don't have to carry them around. This series takes place in 1920s Manhattan. Our main character Evie has recently moved there from Iowa because she did something back home that her parents really didn't like, so they basically shipped her off to live with an uncle. And what I really like about the narrative style is you get to check in with all of these different characters around the city that you just know are going to come together at some point. It turns out that Evie's uncle runs this museum, which is called the Museum of the Creepy Crawlies by the locals. And since there's this series of very strange occultish murders happening, he gets drawn into the investigation, which means that she gets drawn into the investigation. We also learn very early on that she has this interesting gift. She can hold on to an object that belongs to somebody and learn secrets about them, which obviously makes her think that she could help her uncle solve these murders, even though he has no idea she has these abilities. As we go through this book, we find out that other characters have other abilities, and it is so interesting. Also, this book ends up being really, really creepy. And that creep factor is magnified by the narrator of the audiobook. So again, if you have access to this audiobook, this is definitely the way to go. I very much enjoyed this first installment in the series. I am very much looking forward to continuing it with the read-along because this is a lot of fun. I've been meaning to get to these anyway, so it's always good to have an excuse to do it when you know that other people are doing it at the same time. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!